Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of our Porsche door reconstruction. Okay guys, so a little bit of a challenge here on this door. I've literally spent days out here trying to get this chrome work and glass all sorted out to where everything's working smoothly and operating the way it should. How to put all this in a 20-minute video with all the adjustments and little details, I don't know, but we'll try and figure out a way to just get to the essential stuff and show you what you need to know just to keep you out of trouble here, and hopefully just breeze through some of the other things. So we've got our first door worked out here and everything is working 100% and very satisfactory. Take a look at the inside here. So on our inner frame here, we've got our felts put in place and everything adjusted out the way it should. The wind wing here, this is the real problem child of the whole piece here, and I haven't been able to find any good literature or any good video on how to do this, so I'm going to do the best I can, try and show you the correct assembly order of this wind wing. This whole thing right here is really what's going to control putting this together and putting it in the car here. If you take this out of order and you don't do everything just in the right sequence, you're going to back yourself into a corner. You'll have to take everything apart and start over. So the only thing I could figure out is there's only one sequence of putting this together. It's really strange, but it does work, and we'll get the job done. All right, let's take a look and see our window is up here. Okay, and then looking at our driver's side here, so we're just basically mocked up, and this is something you're definitely going to want to do before we start assembling glass and putting everything into place. So three key locations we'll want to fasten into is going to be the bottom here. During our mock-up, we're going to have at least one screw near the top here and then one up front here, and so we're just snugging those down just to play with the adjustment a little bit. This thing can be adjusted to lean in to the top of the roof or out at the top of the roof, depending on how you adjust the screws at the bottom. We'll get into that a little bit later. Also, you can adjust the angle of this thing, so the front can come higher or lower, and the same thing with the back, a little bit higher or lower, depending on what needs to happen. So we'll go over that when we do our final install and see how that looks. So the problem here is going to be the extra thickness of buildup in chrome, since we've re-chromed everything, and any extra buildup in thickness of paint that might be a little bit thicker than the factory. I wasn't able to get the framework into the passenger door without some filing, some grinding, and all kinds of business just to get that thing to work out. So this side here we got mocked up and it is working. I'm not having near as tough a time here as I did on the other side. Okay, so a dry run is absolutely essential before we get too far into assembling one of these doors here. I'm going to say, let's just say you want to take your door apart and put it back together. You want to replace some felt or a piece of glass. If you're just taking the door apart and putting it back together, I'm going to say your degree of difficulty and everything involved is level would be a 1 to 10. I would call it a 3. But if you've re-chromed, you've got new glass, you've got new seals, you got body work going on, new paint job, your difficulty level is going to go right straight to a 10. Absolutely everything counts at that point. Everything's going to be interfering with everything else. And to get your windows to operate smoothly, there's some things we need to do. So once we've assessed that the framework is going to drop down in the door with no problems and bolt up correctly, we can move on to some other areas. So let's take a look at the glass and see what I did to mount that into the rail and the chrome frame. And then the final thing we'll need to do is just to make sure that our glass slides into our chrome framework. And you might have to do a little massaging around here and here to get that bend to work out where it's tight here and tight here. If it's open, you can try gluing it into place with our sealant, but it might pop back, so it really needs to be a nice snug fit before we glue. Trick with this stuff is to let it dry plenty long before you let it out of any kind of clamp or usability state, because we're really sealing it off from the air once we press everything in there. So it needs to have a really good drying time, and once this sets up, it's going to be perfect for what we need. Okay, and then moving on to our driver's side window. So first thing we want to make sure is we got our orientation correct on our rail. This is going to be a rubber seal, and I'm just wiping it down with acetone on the outside and the inside, make it nice and sticky to receive our sealant, and then acetone wipe the 1-inch bottom portion of our glass there. When we set this up, I'm going to glue the inside first, squeeze it onto the glass, then glue the outside of the rail and squeeze it on with a clamp. And it's a really messy job. Get all this extra off of here. So our quarter window is nice and dry, so the next step then would be to lubricate and assemble our latch assembly. And this is pretty much the layout order in which it'll go back together with an upright latch position. Okay, so our first piece here is keyed, so notice the slot configuration here. And the long tail will go towards the rear of the window, like that. And then spring. I'll drop inside here. Okay, and then the idea from here is that this is going to slide over. Our needle's going to go down inside the spring, and this hole is going to line up with that slot, and our pin is going to drift into there. I'll press our button, release. That'll unlock the window, and then lock. Okay, and then next, let's take a look at our frame, the hardware, and see how it configures on the bench here. It's going to be a lot easier to understand and look at our hardware, how it puts back together, than wrestling with it on the car. So up front here, we have two fender type washers and screws there, one at the bottom there. And the square nut here was original to the car. There's a slotted area in there that receives that, but if you don't have that, a nut will work with some Loctite. It has a rectangular washer on the inside. Our middle bracket will assemble like so, and then bolt to the door. And then our rear, we have one screw down here and a fender washer. Also, you can see where I've done some grinding on these thickening tabs. I had to grind some of that off to make allowance for the buildup in chrome and copper. If you've re-chromed, you're probably going to need to do that. So we got two screws up here with a long washer. Upper middle frame where it bolts to the door. Our center section there, and this is how the pivot configures. You'll have one screw going down inside this area here. Right here you'll have two spacer washers, two wave type lock washers, and some longer screws to tie into our quarter window piece. And this will be the top pivot hardware. 3 screws in the top here to hold the middle section in, and then our wind/rain deflector, and that's going to be just 4 small screws on the back there. You'll have one screw in here, and then taking a look at the top section here, that's how that's going to tie off. Okay, next I'm going to pull this middle section out of here, as we'll need to put that on our quarter window and then put this back together in that configuration before moving on. And then a little rubber grease in there. And then next we install our clip, a little bit of grease on there. little petroleum grease on our pivot point here just before we close it up. We just got 2 screws in here with our spacers, and that'll be our look inside. 3 screws in top there, and best position to put this together is going to be upright like this. If you try to do it on the bench, you're going to be wrestling with it. You got 1 screw in the side here, and then 1 screw right down into the top. And as you can see, we're covered in grease and glycerin. So I'm going to take this outside, give it a warm soapy water wash and rinse, bring it in here and install our felts. Okay, so now that we're cleaned up, we're ready to install our felts. So there's a couple different felts we're going to be using here. We're going to be using a hard felt in the top section, and the back rail is also going to have a hard felt. And our front felt is going to be a soft felt. And the reason that is I made a mark here, a reference mark with some tape, is the depth of this rail on the back is the same as the top here, so we can use that same hard felt there. But on our front rail, you see there, it's not quite as deep, so we have to use a different felt in there. Originally the car did come with a hard felt in the front, but apparently they don't make that anymore, at least at the time making this video. So a soft felt works really good up front. All we need to do is just cut them to size. The other thing we need to look out for is up front here, this little area right there, we need to notch out for that. Right there. I've already pre-cut them just to move things along a little bit quicker. So all we have to do is just press those into place and we're good to go. So installing our felts, we won't be using any adhesive or any kind of glycerin to get them into place. Our hard felts just press in, and they're using like a putty type butyl sealant on there, and that just kind of conforms to the area and locks in. There's a lip underneath here that holds it in place, so that just presses in. Okay. And then our soft felt here, that's the profile. It's got a little barb on there. That's real easy to push in with a plastic tool. No glycerin needed. Let's go ahead and press those in and see what they look like. And then we just want to open it up a little bit with a plastic tool. And we'll even work it a little bit more with the glass before we install into the car. But we do need to spread it. And then our front intersection gets a little bit complicated up in here. So we'll need to notch and angle cut that top piece so that it can bury up into here tight enough. And then when we get everything put together, we're going to just bleed a little bit of super glue in that corner in the front and in the rear there, and that should hold it together. And next, this part is really important. So what we need to do is put the glass in place, and then we need to compress it into the top and into the side here. And as we got this little tail of material hanging out, we're going to want to put a little bit of super glue right on that edge there and then gently tuck it in, being very careful. If we don't do this, we will be dealing with it down the road, and we definitely don't want to open these doors back up once we have them sealed up. So a little super glue in this location, that's going to dry for a couple hours. We'll do the back side. We'll do a location over here, and we'll do one at the bottom. All right, let's take a look and see with our glass installed here. So we got this corner is tied off and plenty dry, and then also this one. And looking at our back side, and our bottom felt is just glued in right here at the base, being careful not to get anything on the felt at all. Okay, then from here, what we want to do is we just want to make sure that our glass is actually going to slide up and down the felts and tuck into the top there without any issues. If you need to massage it and open it up, now would be the time to do it. Just want to double check everything slides really well. So this glass has been cerium oxide polished on both sides, waxed both sides before we install. And then I'm just going to put a light coating of grease on our runners here We'll install our glass first. Okay, so we're snapped into place here with our glides, and plenty of grease inside that spring behind the glide. Locked in there and there. So now we're going to roll the window up to the halfway position and bring in our frame. Okay, so that slid into place fairly easy compared to the other side. I've gone ahead and installed the fasteners and brackets and just barely snugged down those screws at this point. So what we want to do now is we want to adjust everything to where we like it and it's going to be functioning correctly. So first adjustment we want to look at is our height, which is going to be right here, right at the crown. I'm going to say if you have at least 1 millimeter in here, that's what we want to do. If you have anything bigger than that, you're too low. If it's too low, you're going to get air in through your seal. If it's too tall, obviously you're going to be hitting the roof. So our next adjustment then is going to be the proper angle of the framework. So you can see here, as we're paralleling our quarter window, we got bigger space at the top than we have at the bottom, so we want to clean that up. So how we're going to do that, we're going to lift the front of the frame, and that's going to drop this upper right hand corner farther back. So we're going to do that next and snug it down. Alright, that one cleaned up pretty good. You see we're nice and parallel there now. And so what I had to do to get there is pull the front of this frame up. Actually, I'm maxed out on my adjustments. So that frame is as high as we can get it in the front. So these screws right here are going to be responsible for up and down in the front. Right now, I'm all the way up and tight. And then the last adjustment is going to be frame to seal at the top here. So what we want to do is we want the chrome to just be touching ever so slightly against our seal. It'll keep the air out. If we have airspace between the seal and back of the frame there, then we'll get air in there. So let's go ahead and adjust that and we'll take a look at it from the inside. Alright, let me try and explain exactly how we got to get that to lean. So here's the axis of our frame right now. So if we want it to lean in towards the seal to the top, then the bottom of the frame has to push towards the outside of the door. If we want to pull the frame away from the seal, then we're going to have to pull the bottom of the frame towards the inside of the cab. Let me make those adjustments. We'll snug it down. Take a look. Alright guys, so our time is starting to get away from us here on this video, as I figured it would. There's a lot of material to go over. I really wanted to get this outer felt and door trim installed, but we're going to have to save that for the next video when we do our interior door panels. So let's just take the remainder of this video. We're going to look at some key fastening points, see how everything looks on the inside of the door, and then see how that seal's supposed to work out from sitting with inside the cab. So starting with the front inside fastening point, see what that looks like. And then our middle framework fastening point. And that's looking at it from the back side. And then our rear section there. So you can see that elliptical hole there. That's how much lateral adjustment you have at the bottom of our frame. And our upper rail fastening point. The upper fastening point with the long type washer. And then the lower, you can see again that hole. So I've got the bottom of that frame pushed quite far forward to the outside of the door. And then our front screws. Window going up and down. Looking at it from the inside, we're trying to just check how much clearance we have between the seal and the chrome frame, and then also the door. You can see we're touching the panel of the door all the way down, and that's pretty much how it's got to look. If you have any airspace in there, then when you're driving the car, you're going to get a lot of air coming in there and some whistling. So we got to adjust everything so that the seal is just touching our chrome and sealing that off. So at this point, I don't have the seal glued into the groove, and I'm not going to do that until we're actually driving the car. If I have to make any adjustments where I need to shave some of the backside of the seal off, or I have to bring it out a little bit to meet anything, we can do that then. But for now, we're just going to keep it pressed into place. And that'll be the same at the top, into the rear, all the way down. Needs to be touching. Okay, so that's going to be the short version of many, many days of assembling these doors and getting everything worked out, all the micro adjusting that has to be done. I wasn't able to cover everything I would like to have covered in this video. It's just too much material and just too many things to talk about, but hopefully you get the basic idea and general understanding how it all works and assembles and adjusts out. So hopefully take some of the pain out of putting these doors together for you. On the next video, we're going to go over the outer door felt and chrome trim there. We're going to assemble and seal up our interior door panels and talk about door gaps and finish up with any last little details we want to add at that point. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on part 3.